Okay, so I've got my running stitch going up through the center of my steek. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so y'all can see. Okay, so I've got my running stitch going up there. See, right through the middle of that steek. And now it's time to talk about crocheting. One thing before you do anything with the steek, you're going to want to go ahead and weave in your ends away from the steek. So you don't want your ends woven in your steek since you're going to literally cut in the middle of it. So I did that. That's all tangled because it's non-superwash yarn. So there it is. They're all woven in. And I've got my guide yarn up the center of the steek, and so now it's time to talk about doing the actual crochet reinforcement. I've said this before and I'll say it again. This is really only a suitable reinforcement technique if you are using a non-superwash, rustic, grippy kind of yarn. If you are using superwash yarn and you want to steek, you need to machine reinforce it. That's not something I know how to do. It's not something I'm particularly interested in doing. I really like color work knit in rustic yarn, so that's where I am with it. But don't do this on superwash yarn. It's probably gonna, like if you just do a crochet reinforcement on superwash yarn, it's going to explode and it's going to be sad, and you're going to be sad, and we don't want you sad. So I'm gonna zoom out so you can see a little bit more. Okay, so this is, I've got the bottom of my sweater here, and there's the neckband. So the direction in which you crochet is going to actually matter. And if you do it the wrong way, your steek will fail. It's unpleasant. What you're basically doing is you're getting it so the bulk of your crochet stitches kind of way down and pull this center stitch apart, because that's where you're going to cut, is up in that center stitch. So the way that you do that, and I'm going to use left and right here as the garment is worn. So it looks like this is the left and this is the right. It's actually the opposite. It's confusing. But so this is the right front of my garment. So when I do the crochet reinforcement of the steek on the right front as worn of my garment, I'm going to start at the bottom hem and go up to the neckband. And then on the left as worn, I'm going to go start at the top and then go down here. And so that's going to basically just pull this center column of stitches apart. So I'm going to use, I like to use a contrasting yarn when I crochet reinforce my steeks. I just think it's easier to see when you're cutting if it's not the exact same color as you're knitting. You're not going to see it. It's going to be folded under, and so you can use whatever wacky thing you want. The yellow is going to be really easy for me to see, so I'm going to use that. This is same yarn weight as I used in the sweater. This is a fingering weight rustic yarn. It's Rauma PT2. Rauma Phenol Garn PT2. So it's got the same kind of grippiness that the yarn in my sweater does. And so you can use, if you're doing like a worsted weight steeked garment, you can use a fingering weight yarn to reinforce the steek to reduce bulk. But I'm just going to use this because that's what I have. You're supposed to use, a crochet hook that is either the same size as your knitting needle or smaller. This is, I think, a little bigger. This is a size F. It was my grandmother's. I'm very fond of it, and it's basically the only crochet hook I have lying around. So this is what we're going to use. I've used it on all my sweaters. Nothing has failed. Just as a caveat, I'm not a crocheter. I know how to, sort of, but I was taught by my grandmother, who was also self-taught and didn't know terminology, so I'm going to use everything wrong. So if you are sensitive and you are a crocheter, you may want to turn the sound off. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn my sweater. So we're going to start down here. So this is where I am going to zoom in here. So this is where the guiding yarn that I ran up the middle is super, super helpful. So that's going up the center stitch. So the way that we're going to crochet our reinforcement, we're going to take the one leg, the left leg of the center stitch, and the right leg of the next column of stitches. And so this is a reason I like to do it. I like to do the yarn alternating like this when I'm using two colors instead of just doing it the same, is when you pick up stitches, you can see it because the legs of your stitch that you're going to pick up are going to be two different colors. So that's actually kind of helpful. So you can see that there. So that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make all the crocheters cringe. I'm going to tie a slip knot and stick my hook in. And I'm going to anchor my yarn right down here. Some people do like extra stitches before they anchor it. I don't find that it's necessary. So we're here. Okay, so we're anchored in. I'm going to zoom out so you can see a little bit of what I'm doing with my yarn. Okay. So I'm going to do, and just a note on crochet terminology, it differs between the US and the UK, and I don't know the right stuff anyway, so, well. So I'm gonna find my running stitch, there it is, down the middle, and I'm gonna fold everything in half. And, oops, get a little hard to see. Take your time, you're not in a rush. Just want to make sure I'm in the right place, because not being in the right place is a bummer. There we go. Okay, now I'm in the right place. So I'm going to do, this is, I believe, a US double crochet. You know what? I'm not even going to tell you because I don't know. So I'm going to take one loop and then do one. And then I'm going to go to the next stitch. And again, we want to make sure that we're getting that leg from that center stitch and the one in the column next to it. Do that. And do that. Oops. My grandmother used to yell at me for tensioning my yarn poorly. I just think I was a knitter all along. I was not great at it. I'm still not great at it. Okay. Oops. It's weird to do it on camera. Okay. And it does take a little bit of time to get the feel for this, like especially if this is not a technique that you normally do. And I have steeked quite a few sweaters, but I still only something, I mean, I've probably done it less than 10 times, which is a lot of sweaters, but also it's not like it's a technique I use all the time. And you can see, and you'll be able to see this more, but you can see how I'm not going into, like I'm not going over, I'm not crossing that guide yarn, because that would be bad and not what we want. Although honestly, steeks are fairly forgiving, and especially if you're using, you know, technically I would never, but technically you can actually just cut up the middle of a steek on yarns like this without reinforcing it. I am way too chicken for that, but that is technically a thing a person can do. So I'm gonna just go all the way up and do this all the way up at the top of my sweater. So you can see, just doing my little crochet, my little bit of crochet that I ever do. And I will meet you at the top and we'll go back down the other side.